Hello everyone, and praise God for another day. So today I get to show you one of my first mistakes. I forgot to turn on my microphone as I was recording, but I did not want to waste good video, so I decided to just dub over it. And what I'm trying to do right now is explain my very first grow. So on the very far left, I'm growing radish microgreens, and I believe that is the tray next to it as well. Then the first tray on the right from center, if you're facing the screen obviously, is sunflowers, and then the far right would be broccoli. So the sunflowers probably needed an extra day to germinate, but I basically trade them all up the same day, put them all underneath one another, and let them go. So once the broccoli and radish, which I'm finding very quickly that radish just grow very quickly. I can get a tray in under a week from when I first put dry seeds on the tray till harvest. But the sunflowers take a little bit longer. They take a little bit longer to germinate. Maybe it's the temperature of the room. But the radish tend to go very quickly, whereas the sunflowers are a little bit slower, and the broccoli tends to be somewhere in between the two. So it seems like I need about 3 days of germination for the radish, and maybe 3 days also for the broccoli. Probably need 4 days of germination for the sunflowers to really get them well situated before I pull off their top layer. The radish grow very quickly as well. It needs about 3 days. And what I'm going to experiment with next is lowering the lights a little bit. So right now I have about 8 inches, I believe, from the top of the lights to the canopy. And so I'm lowering it about 2 inches, so it'll be 6 inches in between. And I'll see if the radish grow a little bit slower and if I can get a higher yield. Also, my first yield, I think I got about 10 ounces for a radish tray, and closer to half, I think, for the broccoli, and about, I think about, I can double check my records, but I think about half for the sunflowers as well. So I'm looking to get 20 ounces if possible per tray, as close to that certainly as I can, and I'm just trying different techniques for that as well. So this is just a picture of the packaging of the grow light I'm using, and it is the Sunblaster T5HO, and I think it's 64,000 watts. It might be 54,000. I'll double check and put that up as well. But I'm really happy with these lights so far. It's nice having one light per row. It'll, I think, save me effort in the long run. And this is just the actual light itself. So I'm gonna show you how to set this up in just a few minutes, but right now I'm just talking about it and explaining that you just turn it 90 degrees, the bulb 90 degrees inside the socket to take it out, and then I walk over to a nice soft surface to lay it down so I can take it out really quick, and then it should be just the light itself without the bulb in it. Let's see. This is some of the contents that come with it: the power cable and the clips for hanging it from basically the shelf like this. They also have a wall mount bracket, which would be useful in different circumstances, but since I'm not putting it on the ceiling, definitely having those hanging clips are a bonus. That's just an extension cable that daisy chains lights together. They won't work with how my setup is, but if you had like a rack next to each other, you could maybe stack them like that. I would do the math and make sure you're not overloading a circuit by daisy chaining too many of them together into an outlet, but if you're just doing one or two, it should be fine. Those are the clips that comes with the light. It makes it pretty easy to hang. The one thing I need for these lights that I haven't got yet is a plastic protective cover in case one of the bulbs ever breaks. So you don't want your bulb to break and rain glass and mercury onto your seeds or your microgreens, because that would not be good. So now I'm just explaining there's both an input side, which you can see, and an output side. So depending on which direction you hang your light, you want the input facing towards the wall outlet. Otherwise, you'll have to run an extension cord or something strange to get it to fit, or you'll probably just have to cut your zip ties and rearrange it. But the very first time I installed the light, I put the output side towards the socket, the wall outlet. Thankfully my shelves are on wheels, so I could fix that mistake by just flipping the shelf around. If I did this a second time, then I'd probably have to cut some zip ties. So now I'm just trying to find the center of the shelf, and I guess you could argue whether it's super important to do that or not, but since I'm trying to grow an even crop, I figured putting it on center is definitely going to help. And something I learned installing the first light, if you measure where the zip ties should be and where the clips actually should be in comparison to those crossbars, it'll help your light to fit all the way, because the wire shelf has a slight lip on the bottom of it, and so you could potentially have your light uneven, and that could alter your grow slightly. It probably wouldn't be super problematic, but you just never know. Consistency is probably the safest bet. But I had the hardest time putting those clips on in the first light, I think because I hadn't left that blue film on the reflector, and so I didn't want to put finger smudges or fingerprints on the reflective surface, so I refused to touch that part. But if you leave the blue film on until the very end, then it's much easier to work with, because you're not worried about making fingerprints. And if you're going to spend the money on these lights, you might as well keep them in as close to as pristine condition as possible before you set them up. So I think it was a good call to not touch that part, but it was an even better call to leave the protective screen on until everything was set up, so that I didn't have to worry about it. So I'm just finishing up getting that second clip on and kind of recounting how much of a pain in the butt it was the first time. It was much easier the second time. And that's where you peel off the protective layer, so I think I'm doing that now. And it comes off very easily, and then once it's off, you can put the light bulb back on and finish installing the light. I think it would be much easier to put the light bulb back in before you hang it, rather than trying to put it in while it's hanging. And that might be a different story once everything's installed, but I figured before it's installed, make it as easy on yourself as possible. If you don't want to replace 2 zip ties every time you change your bulb, you might keep it in place. But these bulbs, I mean, I'm not sure exactly what's the most expensive part of this system, but the lights are $50 each, so replacing the bulbs probably isn't super cheap. I haven't priced them out yet, but I'm refinding center, and I think you can kind of see that everything lines up with the crossbars on the shelf. Sticking the zip ties in by yourself is a little bit of a pain in the butt. If you have someone else to help you hold the light, I'm sure it'll save you 5 or 10 minutes, especially if you're installing a lot of these lights at once. I decided to only buy 2 for the first go around, just so that I didn't have too big of an investment before I start to get customers. I think in hindsight, rather than buying 2 shelves, I should have bought a few more lights. So the lights, are about $100 for 2. The shelves, I think, were about $150 each. So I could have filled this rack with 5 lights and not bought a shelf, or a second shelf, and it would have been the same cost. And just sensibly, I can grow on 1 shelf but I can't successfully grow indoors without additional lighting. So I could put one of the shelves outside. I think it's just way too hot in Texas right now, so I'm not going to try that. But here I'm just fidgeting with the light, trying to get it on, trying to finagle it by myself, and eventually I get it. I try to make sure that the zip ties don't get in the way of the trays that are going to be above it. So I just make sure to angle down that little zip part. And I don't cinch them down so tight that the clips want to pop off. I mean, they seem pretty secure, but I'm sure you could tighten the zip ties too hard and basically leverage the clips off, which would probably result in breaking your light. So I keep it hanging a little bit loose, not incredibly so, but enough that there's a little bit of play in case everything gets bumped. And if you have to like move the shelves any sort of distance, like with a truck or something, I would definitely recommend taking the lights off. It's just not worth it. I mean, at the very least take the bulbs off, but the encasing light itself seems to help protect the bulb, so doing both might be definitely helpful. And then I just cut those short before I install the trays above it. I don't know if install is the right word, but anyways. The moment of truth is coming up. Plugging in the light. I tried to experiment with putting the power cord in through like the side of the shelf to try to stabilize it a little more, but it mostly ended up making the light sit crooked below the shelf. So I ended up skipping that, and I just used the little twist tie that the light comes with to twist tie it to the side of the shelf so that it doesn't just like dangle. But yep, the moment of truth, the lights work. So I remembered to put the input side facing the wall outlet, which saved me a little bit of frustration. So hopefully you remember that as well if you're watching this video to try to get an idea of how to do this. But the first time I tried to install the light, it was kind of a pain in the butt. The second time it was much easier, much smoother, so I'm sure subsequent light installations will be all that easier. So thank you everyone for watching. I appreciate it, and I will see you in the next video.